Welcome to the 79th episode of Rising Tide, the Ocean Podcast. This is David Helvarg, and my co-host is Vicki Nichols-Goldstein.
And hello, everybody.
Today we're speaking with Andrew Hebard, President and CEO of Nature Crops International, a leader in growing, processing, and supplying plant-based supplements and personal care products, some of them rich in omega oils. These are vital for health, but too often derived from fish oil, krill oil, and other products involved in the overexploitation of forage fish, crustaceans, and other marine wildlife. So, Andrew, welcome, and look forward to hearing about your vegan alternatives. But before we get into all of that, let me ask you what we ask all our guests, which is, how did you first connect with the ocean?
Well, David, Vicki, thanks so much for having me on your show today. So, coming from the UK, island community, I think we've all got a sort of islander mentality and islander genes somewhere in us. And I just need to be near the water, on the water, or in the water to function. It's as simple as that. Just, some people want to be surrounded by trees. Some people want to be surrounded by snow. I want to be surrounded by water. I just feel that the water calls to me. I'm not a very good swimmer, which is a little bit ironic. I love being on the ocean. I'm a great watcher of nature, and I find that I understand the nature and the rhythm of the seas. I understand the rhythm of nature generally, being a sort of agriculturalist and what have you, but I really understand the rhythm of the oceans, and whether that's tidal flows or I don't know, but it speaks to me. It speaks to my inner self.
Right. And they got some pretty rough cobbled beaches there in the UK. What were the first beaches you went to, and then when were the first warm beaches?
So your knowledge is good. Well, being in the UK, of course, you've got the whole of Europe at your doorsteps to travel to, so you can get to some pretty nice warm beaches in the Mediterranean, in Greece. The UK has got some fantastic beaches, ranging from really amazing sandy beaches as far as the eye can see on the south coast and the west coast, and got some pebbles and rocks. We grew up. My vacation holiday, or my childhood vacations, were spent in rock pools, just climbing over the beaches, looking in rock pools, finding stuff that you could sort of look at with amazement and what have you.
When I first met you, we served on a panel together. So it was kind of an oddity to have someone running an ocean organization and then having someone running a health product. Remind us what that connection was. How do we kind of get the topics going together?
Great question. So we were at the Regenerative Earth Summit, I believe, in Boulder, probably 4 or 5 years ago. And the subject there was about regeneration. And our business, as you mentioned, we grow crops and turn them into ingredients for health and wellness products. And we've made the shift from growing crops, what you call conventionally, using standard practices, to everything we grow is regeneratively produced now. So regenerative agriculture has become much more understood in the last few years. But that's what attracted me to that conference, was to learn about regenerative practices. And of course, we look to our ingredients as being regenerative for our health as well. Omega-3s are essential for health, and they're very regenerative for our overall health and wellness. So that's a key part of our business, producing plant-based omegas. But then we started to join up all the dots and think, well, if we can grow crops regeneratively that have a regenerative impact on our health, but in doing so also have a regenerative impact on the ocean, because we're not extracting millions of tons of small oily fish and turning them into oil and protein. So it was a confluence of those factors.
Just for the audience who's not familiar, talk a little about regenerative agriculture. Is about healthy soils that are full of worms and bugs and bacteria and actually absorb carbon dioxide, and then the petrochemical treated soils tend to become carbon emitters. What's your background in agriculture, and how did you come to the idea of regenerative ag?
So I'm an agricultural scientist by training. That's my sort of qualifications. And I've been involved in building specialty crop supply chains globally for over 30 years now. We grow crops in different parts of the world, working with different farmers, teaching them how to grow a crop, sort of stewardship required, making sure that it's safe, sustainable, traceable, all the things that people associate with risks in the supply chain, we try to manage out. So that was my background. And of course, when we first started doing that, everything was about conventional agriculture. We used herbicides, fungicides, fertilizers to grow things. And then industry was calling for something better than that. And of course, at the time, you really had two options. You had conventional agriculture or organic agriculture. For a farmer to convert from conventional to organic is not a trivial undertaking. It's a 3-year process. It has, risks and challenges associated with it. And if you fail, it's a binary yes or no. You go through the process of producing something organic, and if you fail to meet the organic certification, you're back to conventional, having spent the time and the money and the investment on that journey. Regenerative is a hybrid version of that. It's striving towards farming better. It's focused on putting stuff back rather than taking stuff out. So regenerating the soil, and as you say, David, it's about carbon sequestration as a key part of that. It's about being mindful of the decisions that you make, about the inputs that you use. It's certainly not trying to mimic organic production and say we're not going to use any of this, but it's using it in a much more sort of judicious way, I suppose, in a mindful way. And I think what really appeals to us about that model is that growers immediately buy into it because they say, well, we are stewards of the land, but it's not practical for me to go down the organic route, but absolutely following a regenerative process. With the war and Russia's invasion of Ukraine and what amongst all the terrible things that has, the consequences of that, one of them that is being felt by farmers, of course, is the price of ammonium nitrate and urea, and getting up to nearly $1,000 a ton. It's really making people think about, gosh, that's a lot of money to spend on something that I was going to end up down a water course somewhere. So we're absolutely seeing that coming to people's mind, thinking, okay, this is now driving me to make better decisions. It's unfortunate that it's a monetary thing, but that is often the way with humans. It's not until we feel it in our wallets that do we sort of galvanize ourselves into action.
Yeah, so that would also mean, I think those were the elements that you're talking about that would go into fertilizers. Mm-hmm. So we're having a shortage of fertilizers, which is hopefully shifting that balance to actually taking better care of your land and looking for alternatives, which would hopefully result in less dead zones in the ocean from all of that stuff running into the water bodies.
That's right.
It's all connected. It's all connected.
It is. It absolutely is. And we are all connected as well. We're starting to increasingly be aware of that, but it is all connected. You're right.
So how did you get from your agricultural science to establishing your company with the focus on agricultural nutrients and health supplements?
So there's a story, David. So I'll try to keep this short. 25 years ago, I was very fortunate to be working in an industry of growing crops that a lot of them were garden flowers, horticultural crops. And a great friend of mine was one of the sort of global preeminent biochemists at the time, looking for sort of remedies, the bounty that nature provides for health and wellness, sort of going into everything from supplements to pharmaceuticals, etc. And one of his many accomplishments was he was the co-inventor of Lorenzo's oil. Now, I don't know if you've seen the movie Lorenzo's Oil or know the story, but it's really worth checking out. He was one of the co-inventors of Lorenzo's oil. And so he really understood how the human body metabolized lipids and fats for health and wellness, or if you didn't have the right ones, how it metabolized it and you had negative health outcomes. And he said, look, Andrew, with your background in agriculture and your passion for ocean wellness and your interest in sort of biodiversity, you really might want to start looking for a plant that could replace fish oil and something that could be grown year after year by farmers and has the same health benefits. And of course, this was when the omega-3 industry was really starting to take off, and the fish oil industry was growing very quickly. So we spent a long time looking for a plant that could produce the health benefits of fish oil, and there aren't that many around globally, and we probably evaluated 100 or 200 different species from around the world. And we went through a process thinking, even if you find the right one, you have to find one that is willing to be grown, can be domesticated, because a lot of these things have come from very remote parts of the world, and one that farmers would embrace. Because if a farmer has grown wheat or corn or barley for 3 generations, persuading him not to grow corn or barley for another generation is a big challenge. So we did a combination of agronomy research, finding out what crops would grow. We did biochemical analysis to see what the composition of this looked like. And then we did human clinical trials to make sure that when we use the oil, we get the anticipated health benefits. So that was a very long process, going from what was almost like a stage of plant discovery out in the wild, like the Druids did back in my homeland 3,000 years ago, to something that's sort of bringing it into the modern day, where we're looking for crops that could be grown in rotation with things like canola and wheat, and making sure that they're safe and what have you. So that was the background. And we were very lucky. We did a lot of research, we did a lot of studying, we did a lot of trial and error, but we also had a lot of luck. And we did find a plant, and we've now named it ahi flower, ahi after the yellowfin tuna, and flower because it has flowers on it. So think of sunflower, ahi flower is kind of like the equivalent. We now grow that on thousands of acres with farmers that we've recruited and trained, and we press the seeds using mechanical old-fashioned presses like they make olive oil. And we supply the oil into the dietary supplement, health and wellness, and now looking at sort of plant-based beverage markets as well, where people are looking for a fully regeneratively grown plant-based omega that they can look at and say, yeah, I don't need to take fish oil. This will be an ideal replacement for fish oil. And of course, you don't get all the other effects of it repeating on you, and kind of feel good about taking it at the end of the day.
And where did you find this plant? It was referred to as weed before they realized it was an agricultural product.
Right. So it's actually found throughout many parts of the world. It's found here in North Carolina. It's found up into Maine and into Canada, all through Europe. And it falls within this family of plants called Lithospermum. But we actually found it in the UK growing in a hedgerow. Colloquial name in the UK is called stone seed. Very few plants, if you can imagine eating a seed that would actually have, the shell of ahi flower has calcium carbonate. And calcium carbonate is the same as limestone. It's the same as oyster shells. So this has this unique calcium carbonate shell around it. And we're starting to look at other applications for the calcium carbonate, because as well as being in oyster shells, it's actually what goes into a chicken shell, an egg shell. 97% of an eggshell is calcium carbonate. So we have backyard chickens here, we have to feed them bits of grit to make their eggshells. So we're now looking at grinding up ahi flower seed to provide an omega-3 and also a calcium carbonate source for the eggshell and the overall gizzard health. So we're sort of tapping into a whole plethora of other things there that the plant species has. And I suppose my closing comment on that is, isn't it wonderful that we can go and discover new species that are biodiverse, they use pollinators, they could be grown regeneratively, very low users of fertilizer and pesticides and herbicides, and add to the overall sort of rich tapestry of crops that can be grown.
With your ahi flower supplements, which I have to say I do take and love, how would you compare their strength, their benefits to a traditional fish oil?
Your question there about what the difference is, I would describe it, this isn't the best way of describing it, but it's a very cliched term, but it's about the journey through your body rather than the destination. And by that I mean, if the destination is we create EPA and DHA in our bodies, which we do, and they're essential, absolutely essential for maintaining cardiovascular health, cognition, inflammatory modulation, all of those sort of things. But when we create EPA and DHA in our bodies, we actually, at each process along the way, we create really valuable metabolites that help to go to control those things like inflammation management, cognition management, etc. So the human body is a wonderful biochemical reactor that doesn't do things willy-nilly or wastefully. It does things when it needs to do it. And what we're finding is that when we ingest plant-based omegas, our body uses them like on demand as a feedstock, as a building, building blocks to then create these other molecules. And it says, I need to deploy omega-3s for this condition. Inflammation management is a great example, cardiovascular health. So yes, you can take preformed EPA and DHA. You absolutely can, and you will absolutely see a benefit from it. I wouldn't argue with that. But if you take what we would call precursor EPA and DHA from plant-based omegas, your body should probably see a lot more benefit by using the metabolic steps in our body that we have evolved to use to create all these other sort of health and wellness benefits. You could say that if the destination is EPA and DHA, that's probably only 10% of the benefit that we're missing. We're missing the other 90% by not going through those steps. And what we're finding is that if you take preformed EPA and DHA, you're not as efficient as making it yourself. So your body says, well, if you're going to give me the end product, I'm going to shut down all this stuff ahead of you. Whereas if we start eating better nutrition, our bodies will perform and function much better using better ingredients and better raw materials to build the end products rather than taking them. And I'll put a caveat on that. I am not a doctor. I'm not a medical guy. That is the opinion of Andrew Hebard.
So these are better, in essence, to stick with the plant-based omegas versus the fish oil.
That's what we believe, and that's what we've seen with people that take it.
It's great for humans to have a plant-based diet. It's also pretty great for fish when you consider that over 70% of the global fishery is now overfished or in a state of collapse, that the biodiversity of the planet, which is mostly salt water, is crashing. And about a third of all the commercial catch now is what they call forage fish, essentially taking out the small fish that the larger fish feed on and converting that to chicken feed, hog feed, and fish oil.
We're taking out somewhere in the region of 15 million tons, which most people can't comprehend what 15 million tons of fish looks like. It's a huge amount of fish to make fish oil and protein. The protein gets fed to pigs and chickens, and the oil gets fed largely to farm-raised salmon and then to pets and to humans. And it's absolutely unnecessary. There is zero justification for saying that this is an essential industry. Humans are wonderfully inventive, creative. We can solve such bigger challenges than this, and yet we're kicking this down the road. Inevitably, it will stop. We can all see the end game in sight here, which is there ain't no fish left, and we've got to shut this down. Let's think about solutions now and come up with something better. Let's run towards this problem rather than sort of have quick fixes. Can you imagine if we harvested 15 million tons of land-based food for oil and protein, which is what we did with the bison, right? But when it's in the ocean, it's kind of out of sight, out of mind. It just comes in. We don't have to look at all the carnage that we've caused and how we're denuding things, because we get given the finished product and we say, oh yeah, it's fish oil, it's great. But if we had to watch it in the fields and the woods outside, and if it wasn't bison, we decided to harvest seagulls or rabbits or something else. We've got to move beyond this idea that we can just take stuff from the wild. We've done it with plant species, we've made them extinct. We've done it with animal species, we've made them extinct. We can't afford to do that with the oceans. There's too much at stake. Loss of a species like the carrier pigeon, as tragic as that is, mankind continues. Loss of small oily fish, that's catastrophic to climate change, to ocean health and abundance. So we've got to be thinking big solutions here and not carry on doing what we're doing, which is that as I say, there's no justification for it other than money.
We're both so excited about the alternative to fish oil. by having you create and working with farmers to come up with plant-based omegas. I think is such an awesome idea.
Well, thank you. So here's to sort of put that into context. Each acre of ahi flower that we grow produces as much oil as just under 500,000 anchovies. My dad turned 100 last October, and my mum will be 98 in just a couple of weeks' time. The year that he was born, there was 1.8 billion people on the planet. Just in 100 years, 1.8 billion. And now, as David mentioned, we're 8 point something. At that rate of progression, we can't keep thinking about taking stuff from the land, from the ocean, from the air, from the atmosphere. We've got to think regeneratively and putting stuff back in, because it's just not a pretty outcome, a pretty ending if we don't do that.
And the good news is it's not really a sacrifice to eat lower on the trophic levels, to eat your green vegetables, as my mother used to say, and get your omega that way. And maybe some of those small fish, anchovies, are great sources of protein.
Sardines, anchovies, they are great food for humans. We don't need to, we can cut out the middle animals there, the pigs, the chickens, the farm-raised salmon, and that in itself would be a big step forward about, in terms of sustainability and what have you. But to your point right at the beginning, without a healthy ocean, there is no planet Earth.
Andrew, I want to go forward a little bit, because you mentioned in the beginning of our interview, you're working with farmers to grow these flowers. Are you foreseeing an opportunity to grow the number of farmers that you're working with, or expand the crops, or what, look out, 20 years, tell me what your industry is looking like for plant-based omegas?
What I'm learning is that this is a much slower burn than I thought it was going to be. I am getting closer to the end of my career than the beginning of my career, but that's not that daunting. I believe what we're trying to create is a legacy for future generations by introducing a new species that farmers can grow. They can make very good profit, and they can grow it regeneratively, etc. Our moonshot is to have 1 million acres under cultivation. And that would be, if you're a 1 million acre crop, you are an important global crop. You're in the leagues of flaxseed, for example, that people are familiar with. So I do think we'll get there. I don't think it'll be in my career, probably not even my lifetime. But we're very optimistic that all of the signals are there. Consumers are very much dialed into wanting sustainable, green alternatives. They're not tolerating greenwashing. They want authentic, the real deal things. What the planet can give us now is, obviously, people are reassessing that. So we've got those sustainability challenges. We've got also the recognition that most of us in the Western world have a deficiency of omega-3s. I mean, it's just because we eat so many of our foods coming from corn and soy, which are very high in omega-6. Our diets are out of whack. And to give you an example, our sort of evolutionary genome, our genetic coding, is kind of optimized for almost an equal amount of omega-3 to omega-6, somewhere between equal and maybe 3 to 1. We're currently between 20 to 1 and 40 to 1, because we're just taking in so much more omega-6 from commodity oils and fast foods and that sort of thing. So there's a recognition that if we actually ate healthier, we had a healthier diet, we would have far healthier health outcomes. But that would be at the cost of the omega-3 industry. So that's going to put more pressure on the fisheries. So there has to be a plant-based solution.
What proportion of the omega-3 supplements that people are taking today are fish-based versus plant-based? And
95, between 95 and 97% is fish-based.
So I am unique.
As am I. But that will change. I mean, undoubtedly, it's going to change. And we supply ahi flower oil to many supplement brands, and we're delighted the brands that have embraced ahi flower. And we've got a very healthy pipeline of other brands that are saying, yeah, we've got to be thinking about what our consumers want, and there's supply chain issues around fish oil and what have you. So the tide is turning, excuse the pun again, but it is turning.
It draws me up the wall when people tell me, oh yeah, I'm going for a plant-based diet. I only eat fish.
Yeah.
Have you read the book? I'm sure you have. I'm halfway through it, but Eat Like a Fish by Bren Smith.
Sure.
I have not read the book, but I certainly know Bren and have been on a panel with him. But yes.
Really, I've really enjoyed reading halfway through the book there, but he's sort of applying the regenerative agricultural practices to aquaculture with seaweeds and shellfish and what have you. But it's a great read. And as I think about vertical farming and nutrients per acre, when you can stack stuff on top of each other, it sounds like he's really found a winning formula there.
I think the future of seafood is largely going to be about sea vegetables and shellfish, and the future of land-based agriculture hopefully will be regenerative, and also the place we get our omega-3s.
Hear, hear.
Hear, hear. And with that, Andrew, we would like to thank you so much for being on the Rising Tide Ocean podcast. And good luck with your company and with spreading the knowledge of plant-based supplements and helping us save the ocean.
Well, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed it. I love conversations where it kind of stretches my brain to think big picture and blue sky stuff. So thanks so much for your time, and a pleasure being on the channel with you.
Rising Tide is a production of Blue Frontier, co-hosted by David Helberg and myself, Vicki Nichols-Goldstein, with support from Natasha Benjamin and Ellie Kurla. Rising Tide's editing services and technical support is provided by Studio Cape May. The theme song is written and performed by Ethan Kenbard. You can find Rising Tide, the Ocean Podcast, at bluefront.org or download it from Apple, Google, Spotify, or wherever you get your favorite podcasts.
Off in the salty ocean, off where the waves roll free, the sparkling water rises, then crashes to the sea. Out amongst the breakers, you'll have no need to fear. It's true, it's the blue frontier. Off in the salty ocean, off to the blue frontier.
Sparky, come here, buddy. Sparky! There you are. Good boy, Sparky.